Welcome everybody to Two Ball Two Bold, episode 12. I am Marshon Parker.
And I'm Nathan Tomlin, and we have a pretty exciting episode. I think going into football season now, we're just about a week away from the Hall of Fame game and getting preseason kicked off. I think we have less than 50 days now from the start of the NFL season, so we're going to start talking about some football. So today we're not going to really go over all the position battles going on and in training camps. There's too many. We don't have time for all that. But the most important position on the field, of course, especially offensively at least, is a quarterback. And there are 5 teams that have, we're going to call them quarterback situations.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily battles, but they're decisions that teams have to make on quarterback play. So I'm going to start with one. And of course, it is my team, the Denver Broncos out west in the AFC West. And I'm starting with them not just because they're my team, but also they're the only team that actually has 3 options. Not that any of them are necessarily great options. I don't think the Broncos have a very good roster top to bottom. They did just lock up Quinn Miners, guard, D3, shout out D3 athletes. D3 guard from Wisconsin Whitewater is a D3 powerhouse. But anyway, locked him up. So one of the better linemen. But the 3 options they have, we'll start with the one holdover from last year, Jared Stidham. And so Jared Stidham's 27. He is going into his sixth year in the league, his second year with the Broncos. He signed a 2-year, $10 million contract last offseason. In his career, he's thrown less than 200 career passes. He's got like 1,400 yards, 8 touchdowns, 8 picks. Last year, he did start 2 games, played in 3, completed about 60% of his passes for about 7.5 yards per attempt, which wasn't terrible. Just 2 touchdowns, though, and 2 starts, 1 interception. They did go 1-1 in those 2 games. 31.1 QBR. QBR of 50 is league average, so 31 is pretty bad. That's about what Russ Wilson's was his first year on the Broncos. His second year, he was closer to league average. Denver scored 16 and 14 points in the 2 games that Jared Stidham was the quarterback. He was sacked 7 times. So not a good showing through 2 games, if I have to say so myself. And their offense, I don't think it's going to be any better. They lost their starting center, didn't really replace him. Cushenberry signed one of the biggest contracts ever for center, which is inflated, but it is what it is. Kind of happy we didn't match that contract. We also traded Jerry Jeudy, so no longer Jerry Jeudy there. So the wide receiver, Tim Patrick should be back, but him and Sutton are very similar in terms of body type and skill set. Obviously drafted Franklin in the 4th round, signed Josh Reynolds. So again, the supporting cast isn't fantastic for the Broncos by any stretch of the imagination. So it is going to be interesting. So he's one option. Your next option is Zach Wilson, who is going into his 4th season in the league. Of course, he was the top pick for the Jets a few years back. He was acquired via trade this past offseason. The Broncos received Zach Wilson, a 7th round pick, for a 6th round pick. So basically, and the Jets also paid most of his contract. Broncos did not pick up his 5th-year option, so pretty much just a waiver on him. See what he's got. Jets are paying more than half of his 24 salary, which is pretty low. I think his salary is like $4 million or something like that. So Broncos are on tab for like $1.5 million or something. He will be 25 when the season starts. His birthday is early August. He, for his career, has thrown the most passes. He's thrown almost 1,000, 57% completion, 6 yards per attempt, 2 more interceptions and touchdowns. But more importantly, what has he done recently? Last year, he did start or played in 12 games. Of course, Aaron Rodgers got hurt famously, like the 3rd play of the game or whatever it was. In 12 games, he completed 60.1% of his passes on 368 attempts. That was a career high in his 3 years in the league. 2,271 yards, 8 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and 3 fumbles lost, so 10 turnovers. His QBR was 30.6, so right on par with Jared Stidham.
Yeah.
He had 2 games over a 50 QBR. One was 53.2, and one was 64.2. He did have a couple games where you watched him and you're like, okay, not terrible, but he needed a fresh start for sure.
Yeah.
But 7 of the 12 games he played in for the Jets, they scored 13 points or less. They were 1-6 in those games. 3 of those games, the Jets as an offense did not score a touchdown. They did have 5 of the 12 games they scored 20 points or more. They were 4-1 in those games. Kind of probably on par with what the league does, to be honest. When you score points, you win. When you don't, you lose.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, the Broncos drafted number 12 overall, 14 overall, sorry, Bo Nix, 24 years old, older rookie, played 5 years in college, had 3 years at Auburn and 2 years at Oregon. And he is a very interesting prospect because he is exactly what you look at when you're talking about a system quarterback. And is he a system quarterback, or did he just get a lot better? At Auburn, 3 years, he threw about 1,057 passes, 59% completion, about just under 7 yards per attempt, 39 touchdowns, 16 picks. Is a pretty mobile quarterback. He scrambles well in college, of course. Rushing yards for quarterbacks are tough because sacks count against your rushing yards.
Yeah.
In Oregon, 2 years, he threw only 200 less passes, but actually threw for almost 1,000 more yards. The completion percentage was higher. He completed 30 more passes on almost 200 less attempts. Almost 11 yards per attempt, 74 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions, and only sacked 10 times in 2 seasons. So what quarterback are the Broncos going to get? We'll see. So it's an interesting situation for the Broncos, right? Because we've talked about this before. When teams draft first-round quarterbacks, it's like a resetting their clock. Now, Sean Payton's in his second year. They signed him to a big contract. They traded a first-round pick for him. Sean Payton probably has 5 years, unless they just are absolutely, they go like 2-15 or something like that. Right off the bat, I think he's got 4 or 5 years before the Broncos even consider moving on from him, considering what they invested in him. But it does buy him time. And it's interesting because, like I said, the Broncos roster is not very good. And most teams that do draft quarterbacks in the first round don't have very good rosters. So that's why they're drafting a quarterback in the first round. Not very many first-round quarterbacks have very good first years. Shout out CJ Stroud. Although Houston did have a much better roster, I think, than what they were given credit for. Changed coaching staff, got some free agents and everything like that too. But if I was a betting man, I think what the Broncos are going to do is I think Stidham's going to start the year. I would not be shocked if all 3 of these guys actually do play, actually do start at some point. I think the Broncos bye is week 14. So, again, I don't expect the Broncos to be very good. They do have a relatively tough schedule because the Broncos play the AFC North. Obviously, they play the Chiefs twice. The Chargers defense isn't terrible if they're healthy, which they have to play them twice. They do have the NFC South, which that's a mixed bag. And they do play the Jets, who have a good defense, ironically enough, too. So it's going to be interesting. I think Nix will start towards the end of the year, maybe after a bye or after a Thursday game where he has an extra couple days to prepare, and probably try to get him to start against a team that's not a great defensive team. I do think Stidham starts. Now, what I think they should do is start Zach Wilson.
Agree.
Because even if you're not winning games, if Zach Wilson does well with the NFL, someone's bound to get hurt. You can trade him and get something. Even if it's a mid-round pick, again, the Broncos roster is not good. You need depth. You can trade him for something, a 4th, 5th rounder, And if you could end up turning him into a 4th or 5th rounder, to me, that's great. Um, Obviously, best case scenario, Zach Wilson comes out and he's what you thought he was going to be coming out of college, or what the Jets did anyway. Obviously, he's got a great arm. He has the best arm of the three. It's not even close.
Mm-hmm.
Sutton and Patrick are very good downfield threats. I do think that's what the route they should go. I don't think they will. I think they're going to start Stidham because I think Stidham's a little safer bet. I think he's going to fit Peyton's system a little better. But I do think it's going to be Stidham starting first. They're going to struggle because they're not good. Wilson will probably get a couple starts mixed in there, and then Bo Nix will come on at the end of the year and get a couple starts under his belt. As long as they're healthy on the offensive line, I think that's what the plan's going to be. But that's the Broncos quarterback situation. Stidham right now is listed as QB1, Nix at 2, and Wilson at 3. I really now you can dress 3 quarterbacks, and doesn't hurt you. They added that extra roster slot on game day, so now you can actually dress 3 quarterbacks. I have a hard time seeing Bo Nix get much meaningful snaps at least until week 10. But
I think along the same lines as you, is I would put Wilson out there just because he was the #2 pick. He was the #2 pick for a reason, talent wise. And there's so many different reasons why quarterbacks bust, the first round. And we don't know if the reason, at least so far in his career, he appears to be a bust. We don't know if that's because of talent, because of scheme, because of situation, because of coaching. We really don't know. Even with the situation last year where, I mean, honestly, if the Jets if they averaged, I don't know, 3-4 more points a game, they would have been a playoff team. So but I think at the end of look, the Broncos are probably going to win 5 games, 5-6 games. Because even with the Raiders have a top 10 defense. So look at the statistics. I can't talk right now.
They got a good D end and a good D tackle. Their secondary is not very good, man.
Look at. I'm talking about stats. I'm not talking about necessarily talent. They had a top 10, maybe top 15, but I'm pretty sure top 10 defense last year. I figure the Broncos will win about 5-6 games. I'm pretty sure the way the season will shake out, I think each guy will probably have around the same amount of starts. Now, obviously, Bo Nix starts will be more impactful because his is actually going somewhere. Best case scenario, Zach Wilson does pop a bit, and maybe they win. I don't know. Maybe they win 7-8 games. That would be probably best case scenario in that terms. I see Bo Nix as more of a project, so I don't see any scenario where he has like an awesome, rookie season where he does something where we just didn't. The greater the scenario will be that Wilson ends up taking well to good coaching. I say Stidham he'll start the first 3 games. And then I think by that point, maybe Wilson will get a chance. They'll want to try to set Bo Nix up for success. The best case scenario will be if the bye was more towards the middle of the season. The fact that it's towards 14.
The last week of bye weeks.
Yeah, that's when you have a rookie quarterback where you're trying to get him in the perfect situation. That's not ideal. But Bo Nix will have, I'm sure, at least 4 starts. And it's so funny because just about 2 years ago, when Russell Wilson got traded to the Broncos, I thought that offense, I thought it had a chance to be dynamic. Coming out of draft, I thought Jared Judy, I thought he was going to be, I seen him as like Amari Cooper 2.0, and I thought he would be a very good compliment to Cortland Sutton. But this will be a good barometer to see what Sean Payton can do as a coach.
Yeah.
He might be able to coach some guys up. They do have a lot of young guys, so he might be able to coach them up. Stidham is going to get the start to begin with because he knows the playbook. He knows the playbook. but I think that's why the whole draft and Knicks really surprised me, because it's like this is going to be a rough season, and
Mhm.
they could have had a chance to just bottom out and get a top 5, top 10 pick, and then maybe draft a quarterback next year.
They're going to
But
get that anyway.
yeah, they are. But this tells me that maybe Sean Payton didn't believe that that guy is going to be there next year. So
Mhm.
we'll see. We'll see. But yeah,
So the one thing that's interesting is, so Zach Wilson turns 25 at the beginning of August. Bo Nix turns 25 in January.
24. Yeah, yeah. They're around the
So
same age.
Bo Nix is not a project to me. They drafted Bo Nix because they feel like Bo Nix can step in and play. Now they're not going to, because they don't have the roster,
Yeah.
right? Because
You don't want to
and
break
I
his
think
confidence.
I think with Jets quarterbacks in the past, it has been a confidence problem. You throw this
Hmm.
kid out there with nothing around him, and it's demoralizing,
Yeah.
and your confidence just wavers, right? And so that's the biggest thing I think with Bo Nix is they know they don't have the talent around him to throw him out there right away. But being an older him and Penix were the two guys where if you're drafting them, you think they're ready to play right now because of their age. Again, Zach Wilson's going into his fourth year and is 5 months older than Bo Nix. You know what I mean? Like, that's a big difference. So yeah, but yeah, I think all three are going to start too.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not looking forward to watching my Broncos this year, man. It's going to be painful. It's going to be painful. But we'll go on, pick the next team
Sure.
that we're going to talk about.
Pittsburgh Steelers. Obviously we know Russell Wilson, Justin Fields. And it's funny, if you look at Russell Wilson's stats from last year, and I know you watched the games, but when you look at the stats, touchdown to interception ratio was close to 4 to 1. QB rating was a
Mm-hmm.
shade below 100.
It's
But
closer to 3-1 touchdown.
yeah, yeah. I
But
mean, I think it's 26. Yeah, 26-8.
yeah.
And but it was a sluggish offense. He wasn't really trying to push the ball downfield. It seemed like he was, you know, who really knows, but it feels like he was trying to minimize mistakes as opposed to making plays. And
Mm-hmm.
me being a Niner fan, I watched Russell Wilson for the bulk of his career, and he was a playmaker. As opposed to someone who was just trying to avoid making a mistake. And it seems like last year that's what he became, and I think that's what really frustrated Sean Payton so much. But I mean, you got the battle between him and Justin Fields. And Justin Fields, he's a dynamic runner, but we don't know what he's like as a passer. We don't know if it was because the coaching with the Bears, because they didn't have the most talent. Although I did think they had pretty good receivers. I like Mooney.
DJ Moore,
I like DJ Moore as well.
Cole
And I like
Kmet's no slouch either, man.
I was about to say I like the tight end,
Their line wasn't
but
very good.
no, the line wasn't very good. Uh, it'll be interesting to see what happens with them. The Steelers, I think Najee Harris is going to have a huge year this year. I think George Pickens, who is to me talent wise a top 10 receiver. We'll see what he does on the field. This is a make or break year for Russell Wilson. I mean, I think if he flames out this year, that's it. That's it. That is absolutely it. And I think if he flames out this year, uh, I think he could say goodbye to the Hall of Fame. I mean, he may have
Mm-hmm.
already said goodbye to the Hall of Fame, because
Mm-hmm.
I think at this point, more or less, people perception of him is that he was a product of the talent around him in Seattle, as opposed to the playmaker that we kind of perceived him to be. I don't look at him like that. I think he just had a short prime,
Mm-hmm.
but I think they're going to start with him. I expect him to start. I think this is going to be a weird year. I think he's going to start the majority of the games, because I don't see the Steelers being. I don't see them being great, but I don't see them being bad enough where they end up going to Justin Fields. I think it's just a weird fit. I don't think Justin Fields is really going to play that much this year. And I think after this season, we're still going to be looking at Justin Fields saying, who is he? Russell Wilson, I think, will play good enough that he starts the bulk of the games, if not all, unless he gets injured, which, I don't really think he'll get injured. And I think that Steelers offense is good enough they'll be in just about all the games. The defense is good enough that they'll be in all the games. And I think that they'll be one of those teams that they miss the playoffs in like week 16. By week 16, maybe week 15, we realize, okay, they're not a playoff team. And by that time, hey, if you throw Justin Fields in, now he started 2 games, and that's not enough to figure out what type of player he is. But I think that's pretty much how that boils out in their season.
Yeah, look, Russell Wilson's 10 years older than Justin Fields.
Yeah.
Right. Russell Wilson there's no doubt he's on the downside of his career. Even if he has a good season, look, if the other teams in the division are healthy, they're the third best team in that division at best.
Yes.
The Bengals are better, and so obviously are the Ravens. And if Deshaun Watson gets back to what Deshaun Watson was in Houston, or even
average
75% of that, they're better. Because the Browns defense and the Steelers defense is kind of a push. We'll see Patrick Queen, because he really struggled on the Ravens before Roquan got there. And then once Roquan got there, he elevated his game a little bit, but now he's back to being the guy. Mm-hmm. So we'll see. But the Steelers defense, TJ Watts, if you're going to sit there and say he's the best defensive player in the league, I'm not going to argue with you. He's on that short list, right? When he's healthy.
Yeah. And if he's not Myles Garrett, probably is.
Yeah, those two guys, and the consistency that they have, it is what to me what makes him so good. But I agree with you. Russell Wilson's going to start, barring injury, most of the season. Now that there's 7 teams that make the playoffs, look, the AFC South is interesting. There's two potentially good teams, maybe 3 in the South. Right, the AFC East. You have, if Aaron Rodgers is healthy, that's 3 teams in the AFC East that are going to compete for the playoffs. In the West, you just got 2 with the Chiefs and the Chargers, right? So if the Steelers are third best in their division, they may get to the point where it's only week 12, and they're sitting there saying, "Man, it depends on tiebreakers, who you played, all that kind of stuff, right?" It's going to be interesting. I do think they traded for Justin Fields for a reason. And they want to see what he's got, because they could have potentially gotten a steal. And because they basically traded nothing for him. So I think they got to have him hit the field. The physical talent of that kid, he's got a good arm. Mm-hmm. He's extremely athletic. He does, at least on Chicago, he looked more like a runner who could throw than a quarterback, right? That's what people thought of Lamar in college, and Lamar has proved them wrong. He's a quarterback that can also run.
Yeah.
And Justin Fields, if they can develop him in that way, and the Bears have been notorious for not developing quarterbacks, so this isn't shocking. But can the Steelers do that? And maybe they don't play him this year because that's their secret, and then they re-sign him to like a 2-year, like $8 million contract, or a 1-year, $5 million contract, right? And then he gets the opportunity next year to start, depending on what Russell does. But I'm with you. He was a former first-round pick. Again, Russell Wilson, watching the games, a lot of his touchdowns were when games were over. They did have that little run where they got back almost to 500 and got right back in the play. They beat the Bills. They beat some good teams. And he played really well in that stretch. Now, he didn't turn the ball over, even the games they were losing, but there were so many times where they just would fail to move the ball. And it was like, okay, sure, you're not turning the ball over, but you're not making the plays. So it'll be interesting because you have Pickens is as good of a downfield threat as there is. That guy gets his hands on the ball and he's catching it. They do need more receiver help, though. I disagree with you. I don't think their offense is very good. Their offensive line is not good. Najee Harris is not going to have a breakout year. Teams are going to dare them to throw the football. They're going to play the run, and that offensive line is not great. So they're not going to have to blitz to get pressure on Russell Wilson. Not to mention, judging what you've seen from Russell Wilson last year, you want Russell Wilson to sit in the pocket and play quarterback. You don't want him moving off his spot and making a play. you want him to sit back there and read a defense, because just judging on how he did on the Broncos the last 2 years, he can't. Not at least at the level that you need. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I can't see the Steelers having a third season of poor offensive line play. At least not at the level it was at before. And I look at the fact that they
drafted the first 2 picks were offensive linemen.
correct.
So usually first and second round offensive linemen are the least likely to bust, barring
Yes.
injury, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's insane how accurate the scouting is on linemen, offensive linemen. It's usually pretty good, except the Raiders drafting Leatherwood. But other than that, everybody else is is pretty good at it. So
I think
they'll be better, but I don't think that. Well, I mean,
and I think not, because you got to think about it too. This is a contract year for Najee.
Mm-hmm.
So we usually see talented running backs in the contract year produce. So I think from that angle,
he's still not getting a big contract though.
I'd be surprised if he was a Steeler next year.
I will too. I don't think they'll pay him.
They won't. They won't. Yeah. But I think he still needs to produce to get a reasonable contract, because he's got talent. Right. I thought that fit was going to be very well for him, and it just didn't turn out to be the fit that I thought it was going to be.
Year over year, he's gotten worse. It may not be him. I'm not saying it's him. Obviously, it's not just a running back, but year over year, he's been less productive, less efficient. So 3 years in the league, and then 3 years in a row, it's he's less than 4 yards a carry. I mean, it's slugging. Granted, quarterback play has not been great, but still. So moving on, the next team I want to talk about is the one team that does not have really a first round pick on them. It's a team that potentially, depending on how they do, is going to be picking a quarterback next year in the first round, and that's the Las Vegas Raiders, right? So they have 2 guys. They have Aiden O'Connell, who was the 4th round pick last year. I get this is another guy with these we're getting these COVID athletes, right? So they're in college a lot longer. He'll be 26 when the league starts, in his 2nd year in the league. Gardner Minshew is the other guy who's 28 in his 6th year. He's only 2 years older. Aiden O'Connell last year wasn't terrible. 62% completion, only 6.5 yards per attempt, which is pretty low. 12 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. They still have one of the best receivers in the league. They have an absolute just offensive playmaker in Brock Bowers, who they just drafted. They did draft Meyer from Notre Dame the year before at tight end. Jacoby Myers is not a slouch at wide receiver. Zamir White, the last 4 weeks of the season when he started for Jacobs, when Jacobs was hurt, 2 of those games he ran for over 100 yards, including one of them was 140. And again, Georgia running backs in Georgia systems, they don't have the wear and tear of other running backs. So he is fresh. And look, I'm telling you, they called him Zeus for a reason. That kid is tough. He's a tough runner. They have playmakers. They need quarterback play. So Gardner Minshew has thrown actually for almost 10,000 yards in his career. Last year, he started after Anthony Richardson got hurt on the Colts. He threw for a career-high 3,300 yards. He actually has better than a 2-to-1 touchdown-interception ratio in his career, 59-24, and was 15-9 last year, which is right on par with that, right? He's very consistent. If you look at his career stats, no matter how many games he's playing, he's around 62% completion, and he's about a 2-to-1 touchdown interception ratio. He's consistent. He's got a good arm. He's a very good. He is absolutely a top 64 quarterback in the NFL, right? He is a backup on anybody's team. I think he should start, and I think this is where the Raiders have to have they have to look at their roster and be honest with themselves and say, do we feel like we can compete for the playoffs? And if the answer is yes, you have to start Gardner Minshew. He's your best chance to win. Now, if your goal is to tank which I don't think it is, because I think if that was their goal, they would have traded Devontae Adams.
Mm-hmm.
Because the longer you wait, the older he gets, the less value he has, right? I think they got to start Gardner Minshew, and I think he starts, and I think they're going to be competitive because, again, they do get to play the Broncos twice. They play the NFC South, which is there's really no team in the NFC South, and depending on when you play the Falcons, if Kirk Cousins is going to play that game, or if he's just back from injury, you don't know how he's going to look. He's going to be rusty. He hasn't played with those guys before. They may be in a playoff spot. Gardner Minshew is probably going to start most of the year. And let's be real, O'Connell, he's not the future for them.
No.
So for me, I think it's absolutely hands down, it's Gardner Minshew. I think he's going to be the starting quarterback in week 1. And barring injury, I think he's going to start majority of their games. Maybe towards the end of the year, they may sit him and play O'Connell almost as like a, hey, we're not going to make the playoffs at this point. Let's lose as many games as we can these last couple of weeks to get a better pick. But yeah, that's what I think. That's what I think the Raiders are going to do, and I think that's what they should do.
And I'm in total agreement with that because of the fact that I don't think he's the future either. I mean, he's going to be in the NFL. He's going to have a good career. He might play 6-7 years, maybe even more, but he's going to be a backup. He's going to be a guy who comes in, maybe 1-2 times a year and fills in if if the quarterback gets hurt, but he's not a starter. And I like Gardner Minshew. I think with the talent that they have, it makes more sense to have a veteran quarterback that's going to create stability on the offense. The Raiders are the type of team that I think if they were realistic, best case scenario for them is they win 7-8 games. The offense looks good. Zeus goes for over 1,000 yards. Bowers looks strong. They found a way to incorporate 2 tight end offenses. Adams is, 1,200, 1,300 yards. He seems happy with the progression of the offense. And instead of them looking to draft a quarterback, they find a solid or even above solid starter somewhere who's looking to get out of their situation and looks at the Raiders as a good place with a lot of weapons to go to. That's the better of the situations where you have a young defensive coach. We don't know if he can develop a quarterback, but he seems to be a leader of men, so if he has this offensive talent and they play well enough that maybe next year they can get a notch above quarterback. Let's just say Gardner Minshew is a C-level quarterback, C+, let's say. More than a jag, right? More than just a guy, right? Then maybe next year they can get a bump above that, and with the offensive talent,
BP plus.
Yeah, and then maybe they can win 10 games, things of that nature. People always think like, oh, it's about the. Not for every team, it's not about the Super Bowl. Like some teams, it's like let's make the playoffs. It's and they've had they've been in Vegas for what 4 or 5 years now,
something like that. Haven't made
and
the playoffs.
They've been terrible. If they could get to a point by next season where the offense is seasoned enough that they get that step above quarterback and win 10 games and make a wild card playoff, that's good for them. That's good for their franchise. So I would definitely start Gardner Minshew. The only way Aiden Connell would get on the field is if Minshew is hurt or if it's the very end of the year and it's apparent that, the season has basically took a turn for the worse.
I agree.
Let's see. Who do we have next? I'll go ahead and go with the Vikings. When it's funny when they drafted, because their QB battle is obviously is JJ McCarthy and it's Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold is still really young. We talk about it's funny because we talk about
27.
quarterbacks.
27.
Yeah, and he's been in the league for
but McCarthy's the youngest of the rookie quarterbacks. He's only 21. He'll be 21 the whole season.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's young.
I would have when the draft shook out the way it did, I would have put money and said, okay, McCarthy's going to be the rookie of the year because he's got Justin Jefferson. I like the running backs they have. Maybe this because I'm a Florida State guy. I like Cam Akers. I think he's a very solid running back. I like their line. I like a couple of pieces they have. I like their coach.
Hawkinson's a top 5 tight end.
Top 5 tight end.
Good security
And
blanket too.
oh yeah, I like Addison. I think he's
No, he
really
ain't playing.
good. Did he get hurt?
He got a
Oh,
DUI,
yeah.
man. That's his second offense in a year in the league.
So they'll suspend him 3 games?
Yeah. I mean, he wasn't driving; he was in the car parked. But yeah, he'll get.
We have to see what happens with.
We'll
have to see what happens with Rashee Rice first because they're not going to drop the ball on Addison before they've even done anything to Rice.
Yeah,
so,
but with Addison, that's his second offense.
Yeah,
in a year.
Yeah.
So it's still going to be something. He's going to get suspended. It will be less than Rice because he didn't hurt anybody. Thank God.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah. No, I mean he'll play, but
yeah. I mean, 4 games at most. I say.
Bro, it's called Uber, dude. You have enough money to Uber.
I never understood
goodness.
that. When you're rich like that, I never understood.
Have your friend drive fast. Like, have your friend drive fast. Let him go to jail. He pays his fine.
Well, the NFL literally has a program that you can call and they'll pick you up anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But that offense is going to be really good. And I said, hey, McCarthy's probably going to win Rookie of the Year this year. But apparently he's been struggling a lot during the mini camps and things of that nature. But I mean, who knows? I mean, when the actual season starts, it may be a total. But I mean, if I'm the Vikings, Sam Darnold is a starter, and I'd say ease McCarthy in. I'd say unless they've got off to a good record, a good start. I'd say let Darnold take the bumps for the first couple of weeks. Give McCarthy a little bit more time to acclimate to the league, and with a plan of saying, hey, we want to probably get him in by week 4, week 5, and let him start the rest of the year. But unless it just all comes to a head and Darnold, that talent that he displayed at USC and the reason he was a top 3 pick, if it comes out finally and he starts playing like the quarterback everybody thought, then hey, even better. Let Darnold play the whole year and let McCarthy sit for the first year. I don't think there's anything wrong with these guys sitting for the first year. You've got them locked in for the first 5-6 years anyways. So what's the problem with them sitting? So if there's a situation where he can sit, let him sit. If not, then I'd say have him in there by week 4 or 5.
Yeah. It's Darnold's going to start. Start. And I would start him too. Their offensive line is not very good. Their defense is not very good. So you're going to have to put up a lot of points and you're going to be running for your life. And those are 2 things you usually don't like to put a quarterback as a rookie into a situation. Sam Darnold knows that, right? That's the situation he was in when he got drafted by the Jets. Their defense wasn't very good, and their offensive line was terrible. Except he also did not have anyone anywhere close to Justin Jefferson.
Anybody close to Jordan Addison.
He didn't have anyone. I mean, I was basically out there playing wide receiver for that team. But look, Sam Darnold has talent. The guy's got a good arm, and then he went to the Panthers, and the Panthers were the same thing. The Panthers are a terrible organization, man. And Bryce Young is sitting in the same situation now. It's not a good situation to be in. So Sam Darnold last year was the first team he was on a good situation with the 49ers, but he wasn't going to play. Brock Purdy obviously was going to play. So I think Sam Darnold, they're going to play him. And if anything, it's for the same thing. I'd have to look up and see if they signed him to a 2-year deal or not. If they did, he's playing the whole year, especially if he plays well.
I believe it was a 2-year deal. I'll double check
because if he played well, then he's a trade chip because McCarthy's the future. But here's the issue I have with J.J. McCarthy, and it's nothing against him, and I could be completely wrong. I'm not saying he won't be good. He 2 seasons as a starter was 27-1. Fantastic,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
28 games, he threw 654 passes.
Yeah.
Okay. 44 touchdowns, just 9 interceptions. Last year, they played 15 games because they had the conference championship and the 2 playoff games. 5 out of those 15 games, he started every single one. 5 of those games, he threw less than 20 attempts. I watched the game against Penn State, and I wanted to take a power drill and go right into my temple and blind myself because that game was the most boring, dull game ever. They played that game as if it was a blizzard. He threw 8 passes against Penn State, did not throw the ball in the second half. And it was a close game. It's not like they were blowing Penn State out and they're like, hey, we're not going to pass the ball. Now, granted, Penn State was not necessarily stopping them, but it's not like Michigan was running up and down the field on them either. They'd get a couple first downs and punt, and it was a field position game. And Penn State's offense is – I need a puke emoji to pop up on the screen right now, man. Their offense was awful, and it was awful the whole year. But anyway, he had 5 other games with less than 25. I'm sorry, 25 or less, because one of them had 25. So only 5 games he threw more than 25 passes. Now we'll give him credit; he played great against Alabama, but he didn't really have to do anything against Washington. They ran all over Washington, and again, that's not his fault. I'm not blaming him, but you're taking this kid, and he hasn't really shown you really what he can do. He hasn't been in any high-stress situations as a quarterback twice. One, he was terrible, and that was TCU. I shouldn't say terrible. It wasn't terrible, but TCU, it wasn't great. He threw a couple picks in that game, and they should have won. They were a better team. And then we saw what happened because TCU won against Georgia, and it was the biggest bowl loss in history until Georgia then did the same thing to Florida State because they were mad about not making the playoffs because they should have, because they would have won again. But anyway, I digress. I don't know, man. And so I think it's better if he does sit. I think it's better for him in his development if he sits because of the not the skill position talent, but all the other talent on that team. And the fact that he really, 650 pass attempts in college is not a whole lot.
No.
Right? Look, Bo Nix in 2 seasons in Oregon had 200 more passes, and he played less games. They didn't make the playoffs. So he played 3 less games than or 2 less games than McCarthy did, and threw 200 and some odd more passes. So I agree with you. I think Darnold should start, but I think he's going to start the whole year. If McCarthy's going to play, and they have it in mind to play, a good time would be week 7. Sorry, they have a week 6 bye. However, it's a home game, but it's against the Lions, so that may not be the best game, right?
Yeah.
Because the Lions are a good team and a good defense and a good defensive line that gets pressure on the quarterback.
Yeah.
So, I don't really know when a good time for them is. I just don't think that I really would sit him the whole year. That's just my opinion.
It's just there. So, I would definitely sit him for the year. And Sam Darnold signed a 1-year contract for $10 million.
Okay.
But it's
dang, $10 million.
Unless he performs, there's going to be a pressure to play your first-round quarterback, especially
I
with
understand
the talent
that.
they have. And that's
But
the only reason. That's the only reason I say I think he's going to end up playing this year, just because of that. Just because of that.
But you also again have to look at that division, right? The Bears will be better. Aside from their draft, they got better in free agency too. They're going to be better. The Lions are a top 5 team in the NFL talent wise.
Yes.
Right. And then the Packers are not far behind them. So best case scenario for the Vikings, you're 3rd. So I would rather protect my investment, and their coach isn't getting fired. He's been very successful. You know what I mean? Like, they're not getting rid of their coach anytime soon. So if I'm the Vikings, I sit him. I learn as much as you can. We don't learn from the mistakes that the Jets made with Sam Darnold, who's on your team now, and go from there. Because Sam Darnold can get the ball to Justin. Justin Jefferson's still going to get 1,500 yards if he's healthy. TJ Hawkinson's still going to get 1,000 yards. If he hurt his knee, so I don't know when he's going to come back. But when he comes back and he plays, he's going to get his targets.
Yeah.
Darnold's not a bad quarterback.
No.
But their offensive line isn't good and their defense isn't good. They're going to lose games because they can't stop people. The offense isn't going to be the main problem for them. It's going to be their defense. But that will take us to the last team. So that you left me with here is the New England Patriots. The Patriots have two guys, and this to me is also a no-brainer. You have Drake May, who's 21. He'll be 22 September 5th, I think, right before the season starts. Was a number 3 overall pick. And then you have Jacoby Brissett, who's 31, going into his 9th season. He's thrown 1,600 passes as an NFL quarterback. Completed 61% of his passes, over 10,000 yards. Better than a 2-to-1 touchdown interception ratio. Obviously, his first extensive playing time was when he got thrust into being the quarterback for the Colts when Andrew Luck retired, and kind of blindsided everybody with that one. Look, Drake May only had 2 years as a starter too, and again, this is where I talk about the comparison of just playing. Right, 2 years he actually played less games than McCarthy. He had 942 pass attempts, so 300 more pass attempts than McCarthy did. Right, 65% completion, threw the ball down the field, 8.5 yards per attempt, 62 touchdowns and 16 picks. He actually ran for over 1,100 yards in his career as well. So he's actually a very mobile quarterback compared to what, again, sacks go against that. And he took almost 70 sacks in his career. So if you take those sacks out, he was probably getting over 6-7 yards a carry on the ground. Look, Patriots, it's almost the same thing. Their roster's not good.
No, their defense is really good.
Well, it will be better, but their offense is awful. And I'm throwing Jacoby Brissett to the Wolves. Look, man, this is what you get paid for. You're making your $8 million or whatever you're making to go out there and take your lumps. Drake May, you're going to sit. You may start a game or two at the end of the year. Patriots aren't winning. I think their over-under is them and the Broncos, I think, are tied for the lowest at like 5.5 games or something like that. Or the Patriots are 4.5 or something. I mean, it's low. They're projected to have a top 5 pick again, which would be great because you can get them a playmaker, right? You draft an elite wide receiver for this kid to develop with. But Jacoby Brissett, to me, he's starting right off the bat. Drake May, take a seat. You'll start 1 or 2 games at the end of the year just to kind of get your feet wet a little bit. But I do also think you have to look at the situation, who you're playing, what that team has at stake, and the state of your offensive line, right? I mean, if you're going to go up and you're going to play the Jets with that defensive line the Jets have, right? Remember, they got Hassan Reddick now, okay? And they're battling for the division or for the playoffs. Do you really want Drake May to go out there? I wouldn't. I'm not going to risk him getting hurt with Hassan Reddick, rolling, tearing his ACL or knocking his head off, right? I mean, I'm not with that offensive line that the Patriots have. So I think you got to be careful in that situation too. But yeah, to me, Jacoby Brissett's definitely starting week 1, but I think he starts pretty much the entire year.
Yeah, I mean, the Patriots, they're definitely going to have a top 5 pick. If they don't have a top 5 pick, then Mayo should win Coach of the Year. That's how.
I can't even name a wide receiver on their team, dude.
That's how.
Off the top of my head.
Keyshawn Butte. I mean, he played.
Oh, okay. Yeah, they just drafted him.
They drafted him last year. I mean, I'm trying to think who. I'm sure if I really tried, I could name a few guys, but I like their running back.
That's what I'm saying. Off the top of my head, though, there's nothing.
I like him. I like their defense.
They just locked him up too.
I like Christian Gonzalez. I hope he comes back well off of his injury. But then again, now that I think about it, I think they're in the contract dispute with Judah. So he might get traded before the season. Yeah. They might trade him. I mean, Drake May should the only time he should play is at the end of the season. If it's like
they still have Bailey Zapp. they still have Bailey Zapp if Brissett gets hurt. You know
I
what I
thought
mean?
didn't they cut him last year?
No, I think he's still on the team.
Okay, maybe
Yeah, I
they
think he's still on the
re-signed
team.
him.
Yeah, but they still got him, and they did that on purpose because again, Drake May's not going to be the number 2. He's going to be the number 3. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Your
yeah,
first
yeah,
2 guys are going to have to get hurt, and then they'll probably still look for a veteran to come in and play
yeah,
before forcing this kid to play. But yeah, the Patriots one is simple. They were on top for 20 years,
yeah.
and you
Take some
know,
lumps now.
yeah, you didn't have to rebuild for 20 years. That's very rare in football, right?
Hmm.
Most teams go through some sort of rebuilding, even if it's the Steelers are rebuilding right now. Their rebuilds are 9-8 seasons versus most teams that are 5-12 type of
Yeah.
seasons. But yeah, yeah. All right. Well, I mean, that does it for this episode. Thank you. Sorry about the long break again. We can try not to do that. But thank you for tuning in to episode 12. We hope you all enjoyed it. Football's almost back, baby.
Yes, it is.